Further debate. Further debate. I recognize the member from Thornhill.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Speaker. It is with great pleasure that I rise to speak to the second reading of Bill 166, Strengthening Accountability and Student Supports Act 2024. This bill is an amendment to the Ministry of Training, Colleges and Universities Act that legislates three key pillars. The first pillar, that every college and university is required to have a student mental health policy that describes the programs, policies, services, and supports available at the college or university with respect to student mental health. The second pillar, that every college and university is required to have policies and rules to address and combat racism and hate, including and but not limited to anti-Indigenous racism, anti-Black racism, anti-Semitism, and Islamophobia. And the third, the minister is authorized to issue directives in relation to the information to be provided about the costs associated with the attendance at the college or university. My remarks today will focus on the second key pillar. The legislation, if passed, works in an effort to reduce hatred and racism within colleges and universities and holds our post-secondary institutions accountable with increased transparency. Post-secondary institutions should be an inclusive place for all students, and as a mother of post-secondary students, I'm very aware that the environment on campus should be that of vitality, growth, where our students feel safe, valued, and fostered. And these students should know that supports are available if they need help. And I truly wish that this legislation was unnecessary and the issue of hate did not exist. But sadly, this is a very real circumstance for my community. So, for example, a constituent whose child was living in residence on campus recently received a note under his door. Drawn on the paper was a swastika and a hateful and threatening anti-Semitic message. I wish I could repeat the message, but the words are actually too disturbing for repetition. Another constituent contacted me very upset. Her daughter had been chased out of a university party after other students had learned she was Jewish, forcing that student to run to another location and hid there for hours before she felt she could leave and go home. Another student that was targeted by other students who drew over her peaceful walls. She had created a beautiful peace mural, and other students then later decided to write harmful and hateful threats for all to be seen on the walls within that college. That student is now so terrified she refuses to go back to campus and will not go back to finish her final 4th year of her degree. She's currently attempting to request leave of the college to complete her final year virtually. And the worst part of this situation was that this student felt threatened by not only the other students. It was my understanding that her instructors also took part in anti-Semitic activity that made her feel not only uncomfortable on campus, but not able to return. Another student could not leave his campus residence because of an angry mob of protesters. They were an intimidating group that chanted hateful messages against his hate on the field outside of his room. That young Jewish man only wanted to cross the field on campus so that he could get to the library to study. And that afternoon, he wasn't able to leave his room, not even to go get food in the food hall to get dinner, because he quite simply did not feel safe. A last example, Speaker, is yet another campus. An Indigenous student was personally targeted, and paint was smeared on a 3-story mural that nods to Indigenous stories of creation. One of the students on campus told investigators that the sight of such blatant hate made him feel like he had to throw up. This is just a small, tiny fraction of the countless acts of hate on a variety of university and college campuses, which are far more than a distraction or a disruption for learning for our students, especially when these terrible acts of intimidation, abuse, and sometimes assault happen without any ramifications against the person or the group perpetrating the hate. Further, when these actions are not recorded by the university or college, or worse yet, never adjudicated, how does this reflect on the post-secondary educational system? Life is complicated, but if we cannot protect our children, our students, our future leaders, who simply want to learn and grow in an inclusive environment where they can flourish in peace and safety. If we cannot provide that safe environment, or worse, not hold these bad actors accountable, then I believe the time has come for our government to force standards on our post-secondary institutions. Speaker, it is common knowledge that hate crimes have drastically increased towards students on university and college campuses across Ontario and Canada. It is honestly horrific to think of all the aforementioned forms of discrimination that occur every day in the lives of students in this province. And our government cannot stand for this, which is why I'm proud of the Minister in Colleges and Universities and the PA for introducing this legislation. Our government is committed to supporting post-secondary education, which is a healthy and sustainable place, so that students have the best post-secondary experience possible and are ready for the jobs and careers of today and tomorrow. Since 2014, there have been over 500 publicly recorded hate incidences on campus, according to an investigative study by the Toronto Star and the Investigative Journalism Bureau. So our government does not condone any of these reported hate incidences. And we also know that so many hate incidences go unreported. This is so disturbing, but something that we must acknowledge and work to address. Our government understands the realities that many marginalized students face on campus. That whether it's hatred through speech or hatred through actions, these issues need to be tackled for the long-term future, success and safety of those in our colleges and universities. But the grim reality is that students no longer feel safe. And this rising fear for their safety is impacting their overall mental health and well-being, as well as their academic success. A new anti-hate policy that creates safer campuses, a streamlined complaint process for students, empowers schools to deal with all forms of racism, all while upholding the principles of free speech. Direction to institutions would support greater consistency with how these incidences are dealt with and ensure a code of conduct are clearly communicated to help protect students and ensure they feel safe on campus. Our government has developed several initiatives to put student safety first. This includes campus safety grants, a $6 million investment annually fund to help assist and support publicly assisted colleges and universities with campus safety programs, like safety training, consent workshops, security equipment such as cameras and emergency systems, safe walk programs, and a variety of violence prevention workshops. Students in my riding and across this province are being verbally harassed, having their property vandalized, and sometimes being targeted into situations that become violent. The reality is that many students are fearful to report these hate incidences, and when they do, some schools fail to take the appropriate action. The Ontario Human Rights Code, which applies to all colleges and universities, prohibits discrimination based on race, place of origin, disability, age, religious belief, sexual orientation, and more. Since January 2019, all publicly assisted colleges and universities in our province have implemented a free speech policy that meets a minimum standard prescribed by the government and based on best practices from around the world. The policy protects free speech at colleges and universities, but does not allow hate, speech discrimination, harassment, or other illegal forms of speech. But it is very concerning, especially since the outbreak of war between Israel and Hamas on October 7, 2023. I have witnessed this, sadly, firsthand, the rising tension among students on campuses across this province. Concerning incidences have been reported all across Ontario involving students, staff, student groups, and visitors to post-secondary campuses. Given the current lack of accountability with respect to hate speech, it is clear that a broader, proactive approach is needed so that incidences are dealt with in a consistent manner. I support this legislation. As a mother and politician, I have been advocating for this for a very long time, so much so that my advocacy started prior to my being elected. And as a government, we will continue to work with our colleges and universities, student groups, and other partners to make sure our post-secondary institutions support a bright future for the people in this province. I want to thank the Minister of Colleges and Universities and the Parliamentary Assistant for their work. Ontario is putting students first. with a continued focus on efficiency, campus safety, and accountability from our world-class post-secondary education system. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions? The member from Cambridge. No. From Niagara Centre.
Thank you very much, Speaker. As many have pointed out, this bill makes some important strides in student mental health, safe and inclusive campuses, transparency, but the bill does nothing to address the financial crisis that successive governments have created in our post-secondary sector, and without adequate resources, it will have little impact on the support and services available to students. Why would the government come forward with a bill that does some important things but doesn't adequately fund so that those things can actually happen?
Thank you. Response.
Thank you to the member for his question. You know, there are three pillars involved in this act, and financial issues are strongly at the heart of a lot of what we're doing, including freezing the tuition fees. But not only that, our province is supporting the financial sustainability of the post-secondary sector by creating a post-secondary educational sustainability fund, which will provide for all institutions in the amount of $1.3 billion. And this fund will support financial sustainability by providing $700 million in broad-based supports to all institutions, as well as targeted supports of $203 million for institutions with greater financial need.
Thank you. Next question. Okay, the member from Richmond Hill.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Speaker. We all know that hate crime and racism has no place in our province, and our government is very clear that we are totally against it. There is no place in it for us. It really bothers me when I hear some of the cases you mentioned, what has been happening in the college. I agree with you that I believe in free speech, but cannot let the campuses continue to see the rise in speech and the actions that borderline or cross into hate. My question is, will this bill seek to prevent instances of hate and address instances properly, should they arise?
Thank you. Response.
Thank you to the member for her question. And you know, although institutions are required to follow the law, institutions are also autonomous with great flexibility on how they handle internal matters, and this includes free speech. They need to recognize that institutions, there's disparity between universities. What they have said would be a violation of their codes and how institutions have acted when faced with those instances. So this legislation, if passed, will create a standard process for prevention, reporting, and addressing matters of hate and discrimination on campus. And getting this in place, we know that it will make a difference. We've actually heard from schools, and they have said they do not have the ability to properly intervene with these sort of situations, and frankly, that's unacceptable. And this pillar will provide them with the methodology of getting this done.
Next question. Quick question. The member from Waterloo.
Thank you very much. As the finance critic, I'm very concerned about the operational funding for post-secondary institutions. We do know that these institutions have become very dependent on international students. With the reduction in international students and the failure to meet the moment, we now know that PSC sector will be we'll be seeing a 15% cutback, which is only comparable to 1996 Mike Harris, Madam Speaker. How is this government going to support post-secondary institutions in their core business of education?
Thank you. Quick response.
So the member outlined the federally imposed cap on international students. And Ontario will need to make decisions on how to allocate a reduced defined number of international study permits to the post-secondary sector, on how to address these new provincial attestation letter requirements for the province. In the coming weeks, Ontario will determine how to allocate the application cap among institutions that are eligible to enroll with international students, with a focus on in-demand labour markets, and implement a provincial attestation letter.
Thank you.